Hey everybody, it's GoblinX, and welcome back to another premiere draft of the brand new MTG Foundations, the core set that will be in standard for like 5 years. Great set to collect, pretty fun set to draft so far, and we've got an absolute banger to start this draft off. The High Society Hunter seems like one of the strongest new rares in the set, at least in terms of draft and sealed. This is a 5 mana 5/3 flyer, so a big evasive threat that's hard to block, and you can sack a creature every time it attacks to put a +1/+1 counter on this. And the most broken part for draft and sealed is whenever another non-token creature dies, you draw a card. That's going to happen naturally all the time, as tons of these games come down to combat between your board and your opponent's. So anytime your creatures are trading off, that's two creatures dying, that's two cards you're drawing. You just get so far ahead so quickly with this card. Really brutal stuff, and a very exciting place to start the draft off. And for pick 2, we have a really easy follow-up if we want it. We have the Stab for super efficient removal that'll also obviously trigger the Hunter if we kill something with it. Also, the Gourmand is great in most black decks. There's a lot of good sacrifice cards in the color, like the High Society Hunter and the Gourmand, and there's plenty of expendable stuff to sacrifice for these cards. So I'm a big fan of this as well. Getting some value off of sacking your random 1/1 tokens to this to draw cards is great. And if you're in Rakdos, you can even steal your opponent's creature and sack it to this thing. So Stab and Gourmand, both excellent options out of black to follow this up, but there are really good off-color cards like great removal spells like a Braid and Banishing Light, as well as the Sunblast Healer. This card has a ridiculous kicker ability. 4 mana for a 3/1 lifelinker plus a reanimation spell on one of your cheap creatures in grave. It's a very good 2-for-1. So this is just a really excellent pack all around, but we are very tied to black, seeing the High Society Hunter here, so I am going to just take one of these great black spells, and I'm going to make sure we've got the really efficient removal of Stab. Now for pick 3, there's that Burglar Rat, one of the really great cards to sacrifice to your Vampire Gourmand or your High Society Hunter, but another pretty exciting card here out of the uncommons is the Tragic Banshee. Now 5 mana 5/3 gives something -1/-1. Not the greatest. 3 toughness is quite low for 5 mana. This can trade down into pretty much any 3 mana creature, but a lot of 2 mana creatures sometimes have 3 power in the format, so don't love the toughness in terms of stat line, but it's not hard to trigger Morbid in black. Sometimes you can do it for cheap by spending a 1 mana removal spell and then also casting this if you have 6 mana total. That's a way to do it. But also there's so many sacrifice abilities in the color. You can have your High Society Hunter sacrifice something, or your Vampire Gourmand sacrifice something. Maybe even get a chump attack if your opponent blocks, and that'll get your Morbid, which is when this card is excellent. If this is a 5 mana 5/3 and it kills any creature when it hits the board, you're getting a great deal. So the -13 part is the exciting part that we're working to get. For pick 4, the Infestation Sage is one of the great expendable creatures to sacrifice. It's going to play incredibly well with the High Society Hunter as well as any other sacrifice abilities, so that is going to play really well in a Tragic Banshee deck, because the more cards that we have in our deck that can trigger Morbid, that can sacrifice our creatures consistently, the better that card's going to get. So I think this is the safest and simplest way to go here, but there is a pretty obvious other direction to go with Wardens of the Cycle if we go for green, black, Morbid. But again, with such powerful cards in black, I don't really see a reason to dip a toe into another color yet, when this doesn't look like much, but it is a very good synergy piece for any sacrificial deck, which is most black decks. Pick 5, that is a fancy Grim Tutor. That's very cool. 3 mana, draw a card, lose 3. Normally pretty bad in draft and sealed standards, but I imagine when you have a rare as strong as High Society Hunter, it's probably not actually the worst. Might be strong enough to take Grim Tutor, but that's also a pick 5 Burst Lightning. This is Red's version of Stab, arguably better. Stab you can use as a combat trick as well to beat a bigger creature, but Burst Lightning you can kick later in the game to kill a bigger creature or your opponent. Sometimes shooting them for 4 in the face is enough to end the game. I'm a huge fan of Burst Lightning. I think I'm going to take this over Grim Tutor, but that does actually seem like a reasonable option in a deck with a really powerful rare. I would not just put a Grim Tutor into literally any deck, because most of the time your best card in deck isn't going to be significantly better than your worst card in Limited, because everything's kind of a bunch of commons and uncommons. It's pretty scrappy. But here, with a rare as good as High Society Hunter, that could be exciting. Pick 6, once again, tons of great reasons to sacrifice cards, so having expendable creatures to sacrifice like Infestation Sage is pretty premium, especially if we do end up going Rakdos, because obviously Rakdos has some other sacrifice synergies than just the black cards. So I'm going to take Infestation Sage here. Not over too much. Goblin Surprise and Prideful Parent are both pretty good ways to get multiple creatures on board. Then the Seeker's Folly, I think, is flexible enough to actually be pretty playable. Pick 7. Nothing much here. I do like the synergy of Fanatical Firebrand with morbid triggers like High Society, or sorry, like Tragic Banshee. I guess it works well with High Society Hunter as well. We can play the Hunter and then crack this to ping our opponent for 1 and draw a card. So yeah, I guess it works well in multiple ways, but especially just being a way to guarantee that like if you have this on board, then whenever you draw a good morbid creature, you know you can trigger your morbid ability and have a creature die that turn. So it looks good for this Rakdos build. Revenge of the Rats looks pretty fun, but you do need a really high creature count and a good amount of self-mill for that, so I think it's a pretty narrow build around. Pick 8, we get a Vampire Gourmand back this late. I think with 2 copies of Infestation Sage, plus pretty decent removal so far already between Stab and Burst Lightning, we can actually take this over the Eaten Alive here. I just think this is going to be a wonderful synergy piece for a Rakdos Sacrifice deck. We've got the Sages already, we have the Hunter drawing cards. This is also good with our Tragic Banshee because it's a way to guarantee that something has died the turn we cast the Banshee. Which does so much good for our deck. Pick 9, we didn't wheel the first Gourmand though, did we? No, that was pick 10. Pick 10 would be the Gourmand, because obviously we just took the rare. When I was actually interested in a Gourmand was in pick number 2. There's 8 players in a draft pod. Okay, so pick 10 is when we'll see if we somehow wield another Gourmand. For now, Macabre Waltz and Fake Your Own Death are both okay ways to get some creatures back from grave. This one you have to do it the turn it dies, but that's not that hard to do in a sack deck, and you can find some pretty gross synergies. Say we have a Gourmand on board and a Tragic Banshee on board, we could like Fake Your Own Death the Banshee and then attack and sack it. Get the Morbid trigger there. Kill another one of our opponent's creatures. Be pretty gross. Alright, pick 10. Not a huge fan of Goblin Borders. I mean, a 3-mana 4/3 is potentially pretty good, but 3-mana 2/3 is just not. Rather have a little more consistent cards. I think I'm just going to take Cephalid Ink Mage. I did have a lot of fun with our blue-black Threshold deck, and this is a great card for Threshold because it fills your grave so much. Burglar Rat is a great card to sacrifice to cards like Vampire Gourmand and High Society Hunters, so join the party over the blue-black duel, which I think is actually also worth considering because, again, potential speculation towards blue-black Threshold here could be fun. Right, Goblin Surprise is reasonable for a sacrifice deck because it gives us 2 tokens. Instant speed as well, sometimes you get some blowouts with it. Alright, pack 2, pick 1. This is a pretty powerful pack. Luckily there is at least one card that's pretty good for us, that's the Infernal Vessel here. Once again, just an excellent creature to sacrifice. You sacrifice it and it just comes back even bigger. It's going to be a 4/3 after you sacrifice it. After that, it doesn't do anything else, but that's already a pretty good deal. So Infernal Vessel to go with, once again, Gourmand, High Society Hunter, all of that stuff is going to be good. But what I mean by this is a pretty powerful pack is that Balmor is like the best reason to try to go for a blue-red spells deck. That card's excellent. Cat Collector is great in any life gain deck in white, and white has so much life gain. Very similar to black having so much sacrifice. Like any black deck can turn into a sacrifice deck, any white deck can turn into a life gain deck and get a million 1/1s off this thing. There's also the Llanowar Elves, the Felidar Savior, really juicy pack. Pick 2, another Vampire Gourmand is a huge pickup for the deck, and ideally the only players who should be interested in involuntary employment are players that are in Rakdos, and judging by how the first pack went for us, there shouldn't be anybody in Rakdos. We can probably wheel involuntary employment back, unless somebody's like drafting Boros and trying to get insanely aggressive, but I generally wouldn't recommend running this kind of card in any deck that doesn't have ways to sacrifice things, because then it's just a little too narrow, only really being usable when you're ahead in the game. But different people draft differently. A lot of players that do like to get really aggressive will still run this card because it does kind of guarantee and lock in the win when you're just a little bit ahead from your opponent because you steal their last blocker and kill them with it. So there's a chance it doesn't come back, but I think we still take the Gourmand and try to wheel it. Gourmand is probably a little bit better than it in the deck in the first place. but it's also way less likely to come back. You don't have to be super dedicated to the sacrifice deck for it to be decent. Pick 3 looks like a pretty easy stab, getting more removal here, but had we speculated pretty deep into blue, we could be another blue-black threshold deck. I do think that deck is pretty good. There's a lot of good ways to mill yourself with draw and discard and then surveilling and stuff like that. And obviously, Kiora with threshold is absurd, but even without threshold, she sets up your draws to make sure you're hitting what you need, and then you just like trade her off and you're still happy, especially if you're playing blue-black where you might have ways to reanimate her in the late game. Pick 4, I do think Infernal Vessel is pretty good for the deck, but this might be a good spot to take Bacon to a Pie. Our removal has one issue right now, which is that it only kills small stuff. We can kill 2 toughness cards. With Burst Lightning, we can kill 1 4 toughness card, but for the most part, our removal's all like 2 damage or -2/-2. So being able to kill one of green's big 12/8 creatures, kind of a good thing to have access to. That said, if we get a couple copies of the active treason effect that lets us borrow a creature till end of turn, we can use those as our kill any creature removal, so maybe we still take Vessel. Yeah, no. Gourmand into Vessel's kind of a sick curve, and making that curve as consistently as possible seems like kind of a big deal. Guess I will go for that. And here we go. Pick 5, now we can take an Eaten Alive. Perfectly happy with that. This is going to exile as well, so in some circumstances, this can be better than Bacon to a Pie. We can also sack a creature to do it. So with our Infestation Sages, Burglar Rats, or our 1/1 Goblin tokens, sometimes we'll just use this for even cheaper than Bacon to a Pie. Yeah, this looks pretty great. Diagraph Ghoul and Reassembling Skeleton are also both good cards. This just for being aggressive, and this obviously for sacrifice synergies. But I do still want, like I said, 1 or 2 ways to kill a like really big creature, and Eaten Alive seems like probably the best way that we could find. Pick 6, Perforating Artist here at 3 mana for getting real aggressive. I like that a lot with Vampire Gourmands, since they attack unblockably. It's pretty easy to get raid triggers every turn, as long as you've got the expendable creatures, and we're doing pretty well on that. Battlesong Berserker is also quite exciting. Giving something +1/+0 and Menace off of each attack is quite nice, so it's sad that these are both in the same pack, but it's late enough in the draft that even if no one else is playing Rakdos, we're not going to get either of these cards back, so I think I just take the marginally cheaper card, since we'll cast it a little more often. Pick 7, there's a Burglar Rat or an Infernal Vessel. Loving this position. For curve purposes, it makes a lot of sense to take the Burglar Rat here, but I could see like cutting Goblin Surprise here and running 3 Vessel, 1 Artist. This makes Gourmand into Vessel insanely consistent. Unblockable 2 mana 2/2 into a 3 mana 4/3. That is such an aggro curve. I'm gonna go for it here with the Vessel. Pick 8. There's another Infestation Sage. I did just take another higher mana card, so I do really want to keep that curve really low. And once again, this Sage is so good at getting sacked, so with the double Gourmand, that seems like kind of a huge deal. That Battlesong Berserker, though, saying what's up, those Menace triggers on the attacks can be so huge. And we have no 4-drops right now. Very close, but I'm actually going to go for the Berserker there. Pick 9, nothing. Rare draft a Slagstorm. Look at that Quake Strider Ceratops and hope we have the Eaten Alive if our opponent ever resolves one. Pick 10. I guess Courageous Goblin. If we don't get enough other 2-drops just to make sure we have a cheap enough curve, we'll throw this in as filler. But ideally, this will be one of our first cuts. I'm not excited about Brazen Scourge when I already have 4 much more synergistic 3-drops for this deck. Actually 5 of them, even the Goblin Surprise is good. It's just more likely to get cut than the other 3s. Pick 11. Well, decent sign that all these cards are in Rakdos, but I think only one of them is that good for this deck, which is Goblin Surprise. Okay, Gorehorn Raider's a fine way to top the curve. 5 mana 4/4 deal 2 to any target's a really good deal. In order to get that, you have to get a raid trigger, but that's not insanely hard. Wow, we got a Diagraph Ghoul? Also, last pick Evolving Wild seems like very incorrect, but I'm part of the problem there. I passed it twice. So whoever gets last pick Evolving Wilds just gets a better deck, period, without having to spend a pick on it. So they gotta be real happy. All right, this is kind of a sad pack for us. We just take a Bacon to a Pie. I highly suggest never running Painful Quandary. The fact that your opponent gets the choice means they can always choose whatever matters less for them, and it's the kind of card that's a really bad draw late in the game, because at that point in the game, each player is in a top deck war where any extra lands are just flood anyway, so your opponent can just sandbag the lands in their hand and start discarding them every time they cast a spell. It is not hard to play around the Painful Quandary, unless you're very lucky and you cast it on turn 5, or maybe even turn 4. If you Llanowar Elves it out, or Goldvein pick it out or something, you can get some action with it, but generally it gets pretty weak pretty fast for 5 mana investment without putting a creature on the board in any way. This pack looks really bad for us. There are 3 on-color cards. The only card that was taken out of this pack was the rare, and there's already just nothing for us. Legac's just bad. Juggernaut, super filler. Siphoner, super filler. We'll just take the cheaper filler card. Pack 3, pick 3. Were we to be the Dimir Threshold deck, there's the Aberration, but this looks like a good Hungry Ghoul deck. It's a good deck for reassembling Skeleton as well, but again, I don't really see this card as super important to these sacrifice decks, because there are enough just like Burglar Rat, Infestation Sage, Goblin Surprise style ways to easily have a creature or 2 to sack, and most of the sacrifice abilities are those on cards like Vampire Gourmand, where it's just like, it's a really good ability, even if you do it like twice throughout the game. Same with like High Society Hunter. You don't actually need to like sack a creature every single turn to be happy. And that's really all the reassembling Skeleton accomplishes. My god. Lord have mercy on my opponents. That's how you know I'm going to 0-3. I'm already getting too excited. There's a Burst Lightning, Eaten Alive, Bake into a Pie, or Vampire Gourmand. We can have triple Gourmand, triple Vessel. I already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 excellent removal spells. I think I can spend a pick on Gourmand, but wow. We found where the Rakdos clumped up. And there's also a really good Cat Collector, really good Llanowar Elves. It's just a very good, very strong pack again for everybody. Ooh, quadruple Gourmand. Hello, Eaten Alive copy number 50 million that we have access to, but this is going to be the most consistent Gourmand deck. Now there's the Bloodfell Caves for mana consistency. Pick 7, nothing much here. I don't think I'm going to have room for Sure Strike. If I want to play a combat trick, I think Fake Your Own Death makes a lot more sense in this deck, because it is quite spicy with certain death triggers and into battlefield triggers like Rat, Vessel, Sage. So I'll just take the random Plunderer, but probably cut that. Here's another Burglar Rats. Join us. Pick number 9. Wield the Evolving Wilds. I think we play that. I guess I don't have any double red cards, so the mana base is easy enough to just go for like, would that be 16 16 basic lands with the Bloodfell Caves. So we could go for a 9-7 split here, 9 swamps, 7 mountains. Yeah, actually, I probably don't need Evolving Wilds here. There is a downside to having a land that always comes into play tapped. But the downside is pretty much always worth it for dual lands, since it's going to be both your colors. But when you have to choose one of the 2 colors, sometimes in really aggressively curved decks like this, it's better to just not run the Evolving Wilds. But again, pretty much always better to run the on-color duel. But I could see cutting the Evolving Wilds instead here. I might cut Diregraph Ghoul because our other 1-drops are just more synergistic. Definitely cut Sanguine Siphoner. The funny thing is here, like, with 4 Gourmand, I don't need the Hungry Ghoul. I'm sacking all the time anyway. Just for card draw, I don't need to sack for +1/+1 counters. We are definitely on double Sage, definitely on triple Vessel, definitely on quadruple Gourmand, but I still have 6 2-drops and 4 1-drops if I cut these 2. They are good cards. They are strong cards. They're just less synergistic than everything else here. I mean, Firebrand is really not that great in a vacuum. I just really like how it plays with the High Society Hunter. But I suppose this card is more than powerful enough without the Firebrands, especially in a deck that has quadruple Gourmand. And maybe by making room by cutting Firebrand, I also have a Ghoul in here that can consistently trigger the High Society Hunter as well. But again, you kind of don't even need to build around this card because limited, because drafted sealed is so much about combat. There's so many trades happening every game anyway. It doesn't really matter if we don't synergize with it. Yeah, I probably should drop the firebrands. And I guess the other thing was how well they work with Tragic Banshee, but again, 4 Gourmand and a Hungry Ghoul, I think we can probably get this Banshee going pretty consistently. Let's pop that Banshee back into the curve. So I cut these. We're at 43 cards. We are on 18 creatures and the double goblin surprise. We're essentially on 20 creatures here. So we can cut 3 of them and still have 17. Generally a very aggressive deck, or your average aggressive draft deck is going to be 15 to 17 creatures, which is right where this deck wants to be. So you pretty much just cut all creatures here at this point. I did say before, we do kind of have a lot of 3s. And I was during the draft considering cutting the Goblin Surprises as those 3s. Again, we still have 2 Sage, 2 Burglar Rat, and 3 Infernal Vessel for incredibly expendable creatures to sacrifice. So you can see dropping the Surprises, then maybe one of the 5 drops here. I don't think Gorehorn Raider's bad, I just think the other 2 5 drops are very good in this deck. I mean, obviously there's no universe we cut High Society Hunter, but I have to imagine Tragic Banshee is better than Gorehorn Raider. So if we want to keep this really low curve, we could drop the Raider, or could cut a 2 or a 3 here again. Maybe the Gutless Plunderer here is a little bit filler. It's got a good enter effect if you raid trigger. You set up your next draw, but I think it's not super exciting unless you really care about the graveyard, like you have some Zombifies in your deck, or you're like a Threshold deck or something. That's when it becomes pretty good. And we don't really have that. So yeah, one of these 2 is probably the final cut. Again, likely a creature here, as we're on 18 creatures right now. But it could also be a land, that would be reasonable. Lots of 2 drops here. And we don't have anything that like discards a card to draw a card, so this deck can flood out. We have no mana sink abilities or card filtering, like draw a card, discard a card, or discard a card, draw a card. I do feel like if I do cut a land, then I would want to put another cheap card back in over one of these. Like I'd want to cut a 5-drop and put a 3-drop in, cut a land, or a 1-drop in, cut a land. Like put in 1 Firebrand maybe, 1 Diagraph maybe. Yeah, maybe that's how we do it. Could cut the Gorehorn, still play around with the Plunderer, put in like a Firebrand, cut a land. That seems cute. But I think I'm just going to go with the higher curve deck, because I'm just not excited about Plunderer here. We'll just go for the 17-land Gorehorn Raider build, overrunning a Firebrand and a Plunderer and 16 lands. And exactly like I said, 9-6 split here is what Arena suggests as well. I think that's good. There's an argument for cutting Evolving Wilds, but I'm happy to keep it in here and just have more consistent mana, even if it means playing off-curve a little bit more often. Yeah. I think the only thing I'm not the most happy about is we only saw that 1 Active Treason, and it never wheeled. Active Treason, of course, being steal your opponent's creature till end of turn and attack them with it. I think that would have been really good in this deck, but we only saw the 1 copy, and somebody who was playing Boros or Gruul or something probably took it. I do not think anybody else was in Rakdos with the amount of great black that we found, and that black being specifically good for sacrifice decks as well. Really doesn't seem like anybody was Rakdosing for that Active Treason. But hey, we've still got a very strong deck here, and I'm super excited to see how it does as we hop into the gameplay. Alright, here we are for game 1. A little bit high on mana here, but that's fine when we've got a really good 5-drop to work towards. And we have our turn 1 and turn 2 play. We're curving out on the play. A little bit. Not forever. We've already drawn the 5th mana, so any more lands is kind of floody and a little concerning. Got the stab for the Ghoul. It's a fair trade, but it is not good for us because we're already flooded, which is part of the risk of keeping a 4-lander there. It's right on that borderline. Try very hard to never... Wow, exclusively lands drawn this game. I would try very hard to never keep a 5-lander. But at 4, you do have to really consider heavily whether you should mulligan. I guess we just die to this combo. Dazzling Angel Cat Collector has arrived, and that is every draw of the game being a land. After our 4-land opener, it's 4 land draws in a row. We don't get the Morbid trigger. Could still play the 5/3 just to kill the cat. But I think we hold for a second here, because if I don't kill the Cat Collector, the Dazzling Angel to stop this combo, I'm so dead regardless. So now they ping me twice every time they do this with the Blight Priest. There's our first spell. Luckily, it is a pretty good one here. It's not quite going to stabilize us, but it's going to completely disrupt their combo and get rid of their 2 most important creatures. They didn't want to eat the food? Oh, it only triggers during their turns. Okay, that's good for us at least. So we get a ping from the Blight Priest. And here's where that 3 toughness on Tragic Banshee is going to be pretty rough, because if they send in, I'm going to have to trade it down into the 3/2. I can't afford to take the extra 3. Plus the Blight Priest to shoot me in the face. Phyrexian Arena, when we're Rakdos, the 2 colors that cannot interact with this card in any way. Our opponent is guaranteed to draw a million, and they have the Eaten Alive for our 5/3. Seems good. Stab is not going to be enough to beat Phyrexian Arena. We're in a top deck war where they're drawing 2 cards a turn now. What kind of morbid trigger you got over there? I'm at 5 life, so I don't really have the ability to just let them through still. This game looks exceptionally over, but if we hit our rare that draws a card whenever a creature dies within a turn or 2, that can try to compete with Phyrexian Arena in terms of card draw. But that's really only if they have no removal left in hand. Which is unlikely. I've already drawn like 3 extra cards or something. At least we get them to spend removal on our 1/1 insect here. Yep. Ooh, it's premium removal too. Destroys any size creature. There's a Robbo. That is a large board. And these draws just were not it. We're going to start things off 0-1, heading into game 2. Alright, here we are for game 2 with the opposite problem. This time we need to hit cheap spells and lands. So we'll see if we can't go runner here. Draw all spells this game, all lands first game. The classic. Nope, we've got some good draws here. We've already hit land 3, which unlocks half of this hand. There's Wary Thespian from our opponent. The Infernal Vessel's an excellent blocker for that. And I've got enough 3-drops here to play the tap land turn 4, rather than just skipping out on a 3-mana play to get this out of the way. Infernal Vessel's also really good at getting raid triggers in, since it's not going to die, and even if it does, that would be fine for us. So send that in to trigger the Artist. Does mean we're taking 5 next turn. It is going to be Bit of a battle, a bit of a race here. I suppose I could play another Infernal Vessel here to play it as defensively as possible. But I think this hand looks pretty primed to recover with a Tragic Banshee next turn killing the Thespian at worst. If they play a better creature, we'll kill that instead. Nice, and they don't even attack with the Thespian here, so we're just taking 2 damage this turn. This really feels like a viable race then. Oh, and now they're just holding up the counterspell? Sure. Counterspell or flash creature we can play around pretty dang well here. Just don't go for the Banshee, just send in the Vessel. And slam down another Vessel. We still have a really good play for the turn. Tragic Banshee is going to be just as good on a later turn as it would be right now. If it's the flash 4-2, that's super fine. Because, again, Vessel trading into anything is just good. Okay, so now the only counterspell they can have is the uncommon Essence Scatter. So the odds of that are low enough, at least much lower than the common counterspell that's double blue and 1 that I think I'm supposed to just go for it here over playing Vessel Stab. Although I suppose because Banshee can kill something much bigger than Thespian, since we drew into the Stab, we can just go Vessel Stab here. Okay, they don't have an Essence Scatter in hand. They could still have the Refute, the 3-mana counterspell. But now we've tested the water for Scatter, and they didn't even think for a second when Vessel went to the stack, so we know that it's not that. There's the loot. Now we get to kill loot with the Tragic Banshee. And I suppose if they don't block at all, then we bake into a pie the loot, because I think I'm supposed to stab here. I don't imagine that they let all the damage through next turn. 7 damage. Yeah, something's gonna die, and then we can just Tragic Banshee loot. Is it worth letting them double block and kill Perforating Artist at this point? No, those triggers are really, really good. So we'll just get the 4 damage in here. That works too. They're not playing around stab, fair enough. Would have been pretty good for us if they were, but having 4/3s is also pretty good. Goodbye loot. And there's the raid trigger. This is getting really rough for them. They're low enough on life that a 3-life loss is kind of a big deal. They have to consider discarding a card or sacrificing a permanent. And they did sacrifice their 1/1 fairy. There's the Affectionate Indrik. We're going to have lethal on board after this, though, especially if they fight the Death Toucher. But they had literally no way to fight and not take lethal damage this turn, so it is what it is for our opponent. That is game. 1-1 now. The deck looking way better that game. That was some crazy stuff from our Rakdos Sack deck. We are 1-1 heading into game 3. Mono black hand here, but the Gourmand can draw us out of it. Sacking the Sage or the Burglar Rat or anything like that. We could also just naturally draw the red source. We are not super likely to need to burst lightning till later. 1 damage. Boop. There's Gourmand. They do not have the immediate removal for Gourmand, so we're about to draw a million cards. Wow, and we just drew the Vessel here. Yeah, we aggro curve it. Make this a 4/3. I mean, making the Sage a flyer is also a pretty aggressive move. Either way is pretty good. Drawn into a second Gourmand here. We have more than enough fuel to get them both getting in unblockably. More importantly, drawing cards off them. Our opponent's in black-white here. There's tons of life gain synergies in that color pair. The Signpost uncommon is a beefier Johnny's Pride Mate, getting a counter every time you gain life, and when it dies you get to reanimate something. Blight Priest from our opponent. Alright, I feel like one Gourmand on board is already enough to be pretty happy here. So I'm going to hold up Fake Your Own Death. If I don't end up faking the Vessel's death, then I will just play another Gourmand. But I suppose drawing the land means I can do that as well. So now it comes back without the counters. I get to sack it again, bring it back with the counters. Insane stuff. Fiendish Panda. It dies, return a creature with power less than? Less than or equal to? Alright, that's really good. So if I kill that, they just have a Blight Priest on blocks instead. Still. I guess since I'm having to use a treasure token to cast this Burst Lightning, I can wait till my turn and it's the same difference. Ooh. Drawing Tragic Banshee, I think, means we just don't do that. We just Banshee the Panda, and by banishing it, its power is 0 and they reanimate nothing, I think. Yeah, let's double sack here. Draw 2. Let's figure out how this works, because this is still fine for us if it doesn't work how I want it to, but I'm fairly sure they don't get to reanimate everything if I make the Panda's power 0 when it dies. Gross. Literal perfect removal to have. And still have that Burst Lightning up by not playing the Bloodfell Caves. We get to hold the treasure up, so if they play anything that's really good to sack the ghoul, I can just kill the ghoul before that creature resolves. And that looks like it's not the case. Okay. Play our great expendable cards to get our unblockable Gourmand damage in. Send in the whole team. Oh, there they go. They've got the reassembling skeleton for the ghoul. Pretty cute. Okay, there's likely a better way to play this, but I should have still not played the land because I'm about to draw 2 more cards. So I could draw into something I'd want to play an untapped land for. Alright. Anyways, there's probably a better place to use this Burst Lightning, but I think we just attack everybody. And if they want to just trade with Banshee, that's fine. If they try to sack to the Hungry Ghoul, then we Burst Lightning. Because if we try to Burst Lightning the Blight Priest in response to them setting up the trade for Banshee, then they can just sack it and get the counter on Ghoul. So I'm kind of okay with the trade, as it is on board. Plus, I can Burst Lightning their face for 4, which is kind of a big deal. Okay, if they tap out of sacking the priest, do I burst the Blight Priest? Their board is really weak to a Perforating Artist here. Yeah, I'm just going to jam Perforating Artist and keep this Burst Lightning to shoot them in the face for 4 to end the game. That'll be lethal next turn. 4 unblockable damage, and then a Burst Lightning for 4. Alright, they are dead on board. That is game. Vampire Gourmands getting in for almost the full 20. They did have a little bit of help, but I think for the most part, that was all on our playset of Gourmands. We are 2-1 now, heading into game 4. Alright, here we are starting off game 4 with a Forced Mulligan. Pretty bad mana there. And we'll have to keep this. It's not a good hand, but it is better than a Mull to 5. Land 3 means we can play Vessel, but We need double black a lot more than double red here. Like, I already need the swamp bad enough to kind of just want to ditch a mountain here. Burglar not a bad draw. Something to do turn 2. Sanguine Siphoner. It's a stab. Another black-white life gain deck. They've got the Siphoner, so anything that triggers off life gain is already going to start going crazy. But we do have the Eaten Alive and the Bake into a Pie to kill any sized creature. So even if they make a giant Pride Mate, we can get rid of it. Like if they have the uncommon that gets really big, we'll Eaten Alive to exile it so it doesn't get its death trigger. Wonderful. Right on time, we find that black source here. Drop the Vessel to stop the Blight Priest from getting in. I suppose even the Siphoner we can double block. There's the Fiendish Panda. That is going to get eaten alive very quickly. Double block the Siphoner to kill that. Eat the Panda alive with whoever survives this. And then have a Burst Lightning and a Stab up. This looks like a winnable game here. This mulligan really has not hurt with these draws. Very even right now. Might even be a tiny bit ahead. 1 creature on board, 3 cards in hand, to 1 creature on board, 2 cards in hand from our opponent at the start of this turn. I think it's the Siphoner back. A little annoying, but I can't actually do anything about that. Okay, they're back to being a tiny bit ahead, but still anyone's game for sure. Gorman, that's a great draw. You still get to hold up Stab and Burst Lightning alongside that. Not that we have the stuff to sacrifice to it right now, but just the mana value is pretty good. Now we can kick a Burst Lightning. Oh. So Burst Lightning and still have Bake into a Pie up here, and then we start getting in. Really don't want to spend all my removal, but Vessel outraces the Siphoner. Especially once they start attacking with Siphoner and it's not a blocker anymore. Or if they start attacking with the Siphoner. I suppose they could just not, because if they attack with it without another creature drawn, then Gorman gets into... Yeah, we're doing great. I'm not gonna throw this Bake into a Pie at Siphoner, though, because there are plenty of creatures they can draw that would end my life real badly. Holding on to the extra land, because they are a black deck, they can have their own Burglar Rats. And that would force me to Bake into a Pie the Siphoner, which again, I don't really want to do at this rate. Maybe spend it on the Valkyrie here. I suppose if they go for a combat trick, then we 2-for-1 them by baking, so we can declare that block there. Oh, start hitting for 6 a turn. They're at 15. Still don't think it's necessary. Just hit for 2 more damage by doing it. Because again, I could always do that, and then literally next turn they play the 3/3 flyer that draws a card every time they gain life. Oh, double Panda deck? Alright. That is horrific, because it can already bring back anything in their grave. It has 3 or more power. Mana value less than... Oh, mana value less than or equal to the creature's power. So mana value 3 or less. So it can't bring back Seraph right now. If it gets 1 counter, then it can bring back Seraph. And these other 2 are already so bad for it to bring back. I'm trying to see if I'm supposed to Bake into a Pie the Sanguine Siphoner so that the Panda doesn't get any counters, but probably have to just bake the Panda into a Pie and let them get a reanimation right now. That blows. Yeah, we were really lucky to have specifically exile removal on the first panda we saw. That card is actually filthy. Didn't feel like it when we saw the first one, but it really is. Speaking of filthy, that's quite the draw. Unfortunately, 3 power means I think we have to just menace 1 vessel, and I don't think we get to double attack here. Seems real good. Their own bacon to a pie. Snap trade, we're never outracing a 3-1 out lifelinker. Now we are in a not favored top deck war. We have to draw a little bit better than our opponent. Not significantly better, but we do have to draw better than them. And a land is a pretty bad start from this position. Vessel is not horrible. They've got an instant in their hand. Or they're playing full control mode, because Mythic players like to get fancy. Luminous Rebuke, sure. Is this double removal? Unless this is 2 removal in a row, we definitely take this block. Stab is actually quite depressing here. Just awkwardly irrelevant. Unless they're doing this. It's a combat trick? Oh, it doesn't even do anything here, though. We just bounce off each other already. Yeah, no, stab is just depressingly irrelevant. Wow, I thought my deck was good. Double Sunblast Healer, double Fiendish Panda. It's quite the black-white setup. And they got me. Block take 4. Or attack take 1,000,000. Guess I can play Gourmand, double block, and go to 1. But it looks like 2 and 2 it is. Things were looking pretty good for us. Pretty even for a while there, but it does turn out being exactly 1 card behind from the mulligan is going to get us the loss there. It does feel like there were positions where just like 1 extra card could have pulled us ahead there. So 2 and 2 heading into game 5. All right, here we are on the play for game 5. This looks like a real good start, and our opponent is on the unfortunate end of the mulligans this time around. A mulligan to 6 to start them off. Get the Gourmand going for the Gourmand Vessel curve. That has been so great for us in the past. And here it goes. Draw a card, upgrade to 4/3 stats. Let out a little bit, but if Gourmand doesn't die, then they can draw us out of this. Vampire Nighthawk card is Nasty. Luckily, it's not that insane right now. It's just gonna trade for somebody here. I mean, it is still pretty good that they can just start racing with us instead if they don't want to trade it off because of the lifelink. Ooh, Eaten Alive's a good draw. But if they take the trade, that works too. Alright, we do really need to not draw any more lands. That was quite a land clump we drew into with the Gourmand here. Well, Evolving Wilds will make sure that we don't hit another one after this. They are green, blue, black here. What is the worst case scenario attacking with the Gourmand? They play the 3 mana 4/2 flash out of green. That is a common. That's not great. They play the Brineborn Cutthroat, 1 and a blue common flash. It's also not great. A lot of my draws are significantly better if I keep a Gourmand on board, and they're still at 19, so it'll take a lot of hits for the Gourmand damage to matter. The instant move to combat is either a really quick play for my opponent to hide flash creatures, or they don't have one. All right, if they're that good at playing that fast on Arena, then congratulations, you kill me with a flash creature. But they are not. Secretly just really good at hiding a flash creature. One of those perks of playing Digital Magic, we get to get information about our opponent's hand that we should not have. But they get to get information about our hand that they should not have, like the fact that nothing's holding right now for us. Which does mean it is actually strictly better to not crack Evolving Wilds till the very end of their turn. That way it looks like we have like an instant... Wow, yeah, it's just a bunch of counter spells. They have to counter a Sage. It's got to feel slightly bad for our opponent, but it's actually a good counter there when we have a Gourmand on board. Icewind Elemental. Alright, we found the Eaten Alive target, and now we're going to make some use from all these lands we found. I think I'll Burst Lightning instead. Eaten Alive can kill scarier creatures. But that is the exact largest creature that a Burst Lightning can actually kill. Dreadwing Scavenger. That is more than scary enough to have to eat that alive. Draw a card, discard a card every single turn. Big enough to block the Gourmand without dying. Plenty of great things about that. Ooh, and that's quite the draw. Got the mana to do both here, which is wonderful. Find the Battlesong Berserker. It's also a really good draw. That Menace is going to be really rough for our opponent because they seem like the kind of deck that's just playing like one pretty solid creature every turn. So just one blocker is really not enough to Battlesong Berserker. I could also just bake that into a pie here. But I think I hold on that and just hit for 5. I'll still lethal next turn. I just need to do 6 damage and I can have an unblockable Gourmand and a Menacing Vessel for 7. There's actually no priority to kill Tachiova before they get their landfall trigger, awkwardly. See, full control mode, they still get to play a land, get that trigger on the stack, in which case, doesn't even matter if I kill it, they already got the trigger. But we do lethal them here, killing either of these two. So kill Tachiova, send in the 7, and see if they have stab in hand. If they have stab in hand, they live, and if not, they exactly die. Menace, and unblockable. If they have the stab in hand, then this is a really bad play, but I don't think they do, so I think we just lethal them here. And we do lethal them. So we are now 3-2. We've guaranteed at least a 50-50 run out of this deck, but as you could probably tell during the draft and during the deck building, I think this deck is very, very strong. So I'm still going to be trying really hard to get some more wins with this thing. Try to give it the record it deserves after a bit of a rough start for us. Gourmand and a Vessel. Another Gourmand Vessel opener looks great. That's kind of what happens when you put 4 copies of Gourmand and 3 copies of Vessel in your deck. We are happy to see them. The dream team coming together again. The funny thing about Arena and it kind of telling your opponent when you have an instant or hand or not, or in hand or not, is that there is an argument to not play a mountain first, just so that it doesn't tell our opponent we have a 1-mana red instant, because it's pretty easy to know what the 1-mana red instant is in this format. But I think I'm supposed to just play the Burst Lightning, because if they play their own Gormand or something like that, then I kind of need to kill it. Get poked for 1. Burglar Rat. So we ditch... Oh man. That's a rude rat. The Mirror Match Burst Lightning is going to be very good. Perforating Artist might be the weakest card here in the mirror, weirdly. Because they're going to easily just sack Sages and Rats and stuff if they don't have their own sack card. And I really need to go Gormand into Vessel. Okay, land would have been the discard if I knew we were hitting another one, but obviously there was no way to guarantee that land drop. We really need to land 3 for Vessel. If they have the cheap removal like Burst Lightning or Stab, this could just be a quick 3-3 run, but we'll see. That is incredibly good for me. Because now I get to spend the turn killing that and drawing a card. They don't get to kill Gormand yet. The ward is 2 life. Yeah, so that is super reasonable for us to pay. Them being stuck on mana means that maybe the raid card actually would have played pretty well. I mean, obviously, if I knew that we had the land clump here, it would have been an easy discard of land, but I think it was right to guarantee that we could still have 3 mana no matter what happens here. So here comes a raid trigger from our opponent. Oh no, just the Eaten Alive on Gormand, sure. Not wonderful, as are these draws. Insect for insect, let's go. I'm getting a little concerned here, because in the long run it is better to get mana screwed than mana flooded. Because if the game lasts long enough to where you eventually draw out of the mana screw, that means you've got a big clump of spells. You've drawn a lot more spells than your opponent overall throughout the game. So you naturally do get ahead if you manage to survive through the initial mana screw. And that's how things are going right now. Like, they have all this gas left. Oh! Honestly, almost forgot I had this thing in the deck. Because we literally never drew it. They're still decently likely to have more removal, to the point where I kind of want to just pass and then cast it and Eaten Alive in the same turn. The only way this works bad for me is if they're running Pilfer, which I don't think is super popular, especially in a Burglar Rat deck. Like, if you have the rats anyway, just use the Burglar Rats. There's Reassembling Skeleton. There's still 2 mana up for Pilfer. Okay, no Pilfer. This played insanely well for us because we really need to kill Gormand when they have Vessel and Skeleton on board. So now, Hunter, draw a card, kill Gormand. Trigger, trigger. The one sad part, Eaten Alive is exile, not destroy, so we don't draw 2 cards off of that. I will happily draw 2 cards if you let me. Seems good for me. Oh wait, does that only trigger during my turn? Oh, non-token creature. I'm dumb. Oh, well, we've got the board to send in the 5-3. No sack. Draws are still concerning, but again, High Society Hunter is the most insane draw in our deck, and it looks like they haven't drawn removal, so. wonder what their game is here. Raid trigger? Or stab the vessel? Tragic Banshee. All right. There's still enough cards they could have had there that were like just a raid trigger that I think that was the right block. Because with raid being a main mechanic in the format, I guess Morbid's technically a main mechanic as well. But I feel like that was a lot more likely to be like just a good raid trigger than it was to be a Morbid trigger to kill our card. Oh no! My mountain. Hunger Gwill's pretty bad here. They don't have the sack card for Vessel, so I am just taking 2 a turn. But it is teeny. And it's pretty awkward. Okay, it's good with the rat though. Yep. I guess I kind of don't want to do it on rat though, because I just want to trade rat into the vessel, and then I want to have something with 3 power to kill the 4/3 version of the vessel, which I won't have without the +2/+0. Like, I could block vessel with rat and then sack it to ghoul, but then the vessel doesn't die. And make the 4/3 version. Well, yeah, but then I probably keep this. They're probably sandbagging another land at this point. Then I have a 3/3 ghoul. So I block the 2/1 vessel with a 3/3 ghoul. And then 4/3 vessel with fake your own death. That's awkward. Now I wish I didn't lose the rat, but it is what it is. Ooh, just a pass. Let's go. Let's not go with that draw, though. Eventually I'll run out of lands. Okay. Doesn't really change our combat at all. Makes us a little safer in the long run. Watch me just mill out. The saddest game ever. Mill out to my Gormon draws. Oh, wow, what a chain, though. Well, Raider trigger's not even that good with the vessel on their board. But then I start attacking with a 4/4, so it's pretty fine. And then if they kill the raider, I've got the fake your own death if they kill it on a turn where I attack. That's pretty frustrating. Yeah, I guess I lose. Just assumed in a top deck where like this, they were just sandbagging a bunch of lands, but that makes sense too. Guess I lose. Could fake your own death. One creature? I don't even have one that's like really good to do that on there. So I think I just hold that. Rather than have a board of just like one. I shouldn't have played the land because they could have more burglar rats. But do that rather than have a board of just one Gourmand or one 4/4. So apparently they've actually been drawing all gas, and they just have like removal spells and creatures. They just didn't want to play any of them with the board wipe on board. Yeah, that's probably getting sacked. Something here. I mean, they are threatening lethal. If they do that and then don't have a sack ability for Berserker, it's actually not a bad turn for me at all. Put myself out of Burst Lightning reach. Take 5. They could go land Burst Lightning. I'm dead. Yeah, I eat the food first, then I'm out of Burst Lightning reach. Well, I guess I could have held up Fake Your Own Death if they have a way to sack Berserker. Sick, they don't. God, this is wild. This game is still going on. After all this. Okay, they do still have lands. We are winning the race on board, and we've been really patient with this Fake Your Own Death for if they can kill Berserker. Actually better to just menace the Berserker in than it is to menace in the Rat and make them block with Skeleton, because they can just bring Skeleton back and it doesn't matter. Multiple ways to hit lethal next turn. Got the Abrade, which can't kill Berserker. If they had a way to kill Berserker, they would have went for it here. So I think we Fake Your Own Death this. It's more likely to hit lethal next turn, with this being able to maybe be unblockable. Because if I don't Fake Your Own Death there, then they can survive by playing any blocker to be able to double block a menace creature. Alright, raid trigger this time. Since I let it through, it's actually a raid trigger. And it's Heraldic Banner, which is not enough. Oh my god, I thought for sure we lost to that board wipe. Ooh. Drawn out game of Magic there. We really had to fight for it. Super swingy one. I thought for sure we were winning off the High Society Hunter. Bunch of Flood, but we find the High Society Hunter, and it's like, alright, well, we probably win here, but draws us, I think, 2 cards before it dies, and then it's like, well, now we got a back and forth here, and then the board wipe happens. I'm like, alright, now we're definitely losing, and then just drags out just long enough. The Berserker pulls out the victory for us. Crazy battle there, but we are 4-2, guaranteed a positive win rate with this deck, and at least breaking even in terms of prize out with 1,400 gems and 3 packs as our prizes in the 1,500 gem events. Super pumped about that, but we are fighting as hard as we can for some more wins as we head into game number 7. Another 4-lander. I think our only... No, we lost twice. One of our 2 losses was keeping a 4-lander and then drawing a bunch of lands. But we have the 2-drop and we have the 5 drops to use all this mana on. But here we go. Back at it again. First draw is a land. So now any land draws are terribly bad. Our opponent is green-red, starting with turn 1 Llanowar Elves. Into Fire Spitter Whelp. Yeah, they're curving. They're curving, and we're hitting exclusively lands. Back at it. The Immolator for the Gormond as well. At least we drew the best card in our deck, but we also drew every single 5-mana card in our entire deck. These are the only spells we could have drawn to not be able to cast anything still. So, this is not a great start. If they don't Immolator the Gormond and they let us get an attack trigger off it, we've got a great raid turn next turn. But that is only if they don't play 3 toughness or greater creature here. Would be very surprised if they don't Immolate here. No Immolate. We take those. They're going to go for a Prowess trigger, in which case we just trade Gormond into whatever spell they're casting. Still a 1-for-1 trade. Block with Immolator. Okay, basically sack the Immolator to kill Gormond, which is what was going to happen anyway, which is why I felt perfectly fine to send in the chump attack there. Because it's like, they can always just Immolator or Gormond the second it's an issue anyway. I think, despite the Whelp potentially threatening a lot of damage, I think we try to kill this Immolator here, so they have less options for killing High Society Hunter. Okay, that's super cute. They did have the Burst Lightning Shoot Face. I'm surprised they didn't go for that to get a free kill on Gormond. It plays out the same way for them because we end up killing that here, but... Let's see. Okay, Stab's a good draw. Stab Banshee. You have 2 cards in hand. Yep. Stab the Whelp. That way if they do have like a giant growth for Llanowar Elves or something, still get around the Prowess on the Immolator. Alright. This is the benefit of drawing every 5-drop in your deck. Even against the green-red deck, we somehow have the beefiest creatures right now. I am out of removal, though, because I did kind of have to deploy it pretty aggressively there to stay alive. There's the Fiend Artisan for a 4/4, and they can grab any creature out of their deck. At least that's too big for our removal. I mean, we could have killed it with Banshee, but the rest of our removal would not have got there. Yeah, sack the Llanowar Elves turn into something really big is going to be bad for me. Let's get rid of their last card in hand or force them to cast it right now. Land it is, and now at least I'll draw a card every time they use the Fiend Artisan. Go team go. Hopefully our incredible rare can steal this victory for us. Despite our slow curve out. So far so good. They're down to 7. They need something wild from this Fiend Artisan then. They're playing off the top. I guess they could top deck a really big combat trick and lethal us with Rogue's Passage. But that does not look to be what they drew here. Grabbing a 5-mana creature. Grabbing a 5-mana creature. Dragon Trainer. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Multiple blockers here. Trade into the High Society Hunter. They're at 7. Trade there. Chump there, go to 2. And I don't love losing High Society Hunter, but I have to imagine this is our best play. I mean, making a board state this wide when they're at 2 life is our best way to try to lock in lethal here. Draw another card off Dragon Trainer dying, because they died at the same time, so Hunter sees the Dragon Trainer dying. And there's Fake Your Own Death. 1 millisecond too late, but still a good draw. If they hit the right combat trick, Fiend Artisan still kills us. There's that. Looks like they did not. It's double Cerberus. That's already dead on board to the unblockable Gourmand alone. Another heart pounder there. Really did not feel great early taking all that damage. We were constantly very close to dead thanks to their Rogue's Passage for unblockable. With that massive Fiend Artisan there. Had they hit the right draw, they could have just top decked Giant Growth that, Rogue's Passage that, GG. So really close game of Magic, even if we do end at like 9 life. If it doesn't look super, super close in the end, it was still very, very close with how it played out. We are 5-2, actually guaranteed in the money now. Excellent spot to be. I'm happy here, or better, but I love this deck so much, I'd really like to see it get a 7 win, so fingers crossed. 5-2 heading into Game 8. Ooh, let's go. This second half of the draft has been a lot of High Society Hunter nonsense, and I am all for it. I'll take whatever advantages I can get. We are on the draw here against a black-white deck with turn 1 Healer's Hawk, so that is a super threatening start for the life gain deck. Luckily, we have a decently threatening start ourselves if they don't have the cheap removal. If they have the stabs and stuff here, we're quite sad. But if Gourmand sticks around, we've got the Gourmand into Vessel. Oof. Alright, real scary start. There's the Inspiring Paladin, so all of their creatures with counters on them have First Strike during their turn, and the Paladin just automatically has First Strike as well. So this 4/3 blocker does not actually block the Paladin or the Ghoul well, because Ghoul can just sack something else to First Strike the Vessel, but then they have to lose the Healer's Hawk, so I don't mind trading for Healer's Hawk here and soaking up one of their mana. Unless I'm really racing here, but they're like black-white, so it's kind of hard to race with lifelink on their board and in their deck everywhere. Kill Healer's Hawk, soak up a mana. Is that really worth it when I've got a Gorehorn Raider that can also kill the Hawk? Need to hit 5 mana to cast that. I just can't block anywhere else on the ground well with the Vessel anyway. I don't know. It is a damned if we do, damned if we don't situation on these blocks. We're down to 11. Suppose I would have soaked up 3 damage as well. Still been at 14 off that block. Ooh, Stab makes that block incredible. Also makes attacks a lot safer. I guess the block's good enough to hold that up for Stab. Cool. Awkwardly, I think we're behind enough here on the draw facing this black-white aggro that we're going to have to Gorehorn Raider before the High Society Hunter as well. Obviously, you would theoretically want to play it before any, shoot. Do I have to stab the flyer? No, because I can Raider the flyer. Okay. I was going to say, theoretically, you want to play it before you're killing all the creatures with cards like Gorehorn Raider, but I need to kill these creatures quick, because I'm going to 4 right now. Yeah, the Savior was pretty good there. There's the Eaten Alive. Alright, so now I know I'm golden, because I can just Eaten Alive another creature next turn, alongside the High Society Hunter, and that gets the High Society Hunter card draw. They've still got 4 cards in hand, though, and they're all spells. A Rabo's one of them? Gross, with the savior being a cat. It's quite nasty. It's buffing savior and the cat token, so I probably have to eat that alive. I'm really sad about my sack options for this eaten alive, though. Am I sad enough to not sack right now? And just hardcast this next turn? No, it's probably best to get the Sarabo out of the way immediately and cycle through the deck a little bit with High Society Hunter. Cycle a Gourmand into a draw. I think Vessel's like crazy bad at blocking here because of the first strike, so I'm just going to send it. I am at 6, so I could also just hold. That would be fine too. I feel like the most likely bad case scenario for us is a removal spell that gets thrown at Hunter. In which case I still go 4-4 on the 3-3, 2-2 on the 1-1. I take 2 damage, I'm still fine. I mean, I'm not happy, but I survive. The kind of worst case scenario. Oh no! Worst case scenario is just another insane rare. Flying and indestructible. Well, now I have to... Oh my god, it's got first strike. I don't even... Yeah, I guess I should have just chumped. I don't know. I mean, I draw 2 cards this turn by playing it out this way. Two blockers on the ground. I guess I kind of want 3 blockers on the ground because I need to... No, I die to 1 removal spell either way, because if they hit a removal spell, they kill my flyer, and they put this on anything and I die. Even if I have my own removal spell. Unless it's instant speed removal to kill the flyer. So I think... Oh, man. I think I do this. Because again, removal just kills the flyer and then it doesn't matter how many ground troops I have. Come on, draw number 2. Artist does not do it, but we're technically not dead. Dead. Until they show me removal for the hunter. Too many blockers. This is too many lands. I need instant speed removal off the top for Inspiring Paladin. I need 3 blockers on the ground. I actually don't need 3 blockers on the ground because they have to block one of these. In which case they only have 2 attackers on the ground. But I have to attack with Gourmand. Because if I don't attack with Gourmand, I don't have interaction for the flyer and I die. I don't think I get to attack with anybody else because I just have to sack another creature, and the only way to have 3 blockers up then is to hold the other 3 up. Stab's too small. And that's game. A lot of flood today, sadly. We had the option of going for the 16 land version, but the 16 land version doesn't have anything to deal with flyers either, or anything more to deal with flyers in this version, so maybe I outrace them if I draw a what was I playing over the 17th land anyway? A Goblin Surprise or something? But I don't know. I think it's mainly just variance against us for this deck. Sad loss there, but a pretty good comeback overall. Still making it to 5 wins here, still being up in the money. I just think that this deck was incredibly capable of a 7-win run and didn't quite get there. I think this is probably the strongest deck we've drafted in this format, by a little bit. It's definitely better than the 7-win Rakdos deck that we had. It's more consistent than that deck and has a better rare than that deck had. So I think it's better than our other Rakdos deck, but it got a significantly worse record. 5-3 instead of 7-1 or 7-2. But it happens. That's Magic. There is variance as part of the game. Still really happy with how I drafted this. Maybe there were a couple little misplays that could have pulled ahead a little bit because those losses were really, really close. Kind of long, drawn out top deck war kind of things where just being a card ahead or a card could have made like all the difference. So maybe there was something like that there. But yeah, I think I don't remember exactly, but I think our 16 land version was going to be like this. Drop the Gorehorn Raider. And I don't think this is like that much more significantly likely to win those games where we flooded out. Yeah, I mean the Goblin Surprise could have done something. I don't think the Firebrand ever looked like it was going to have particularly excellent targets ever, but it did make the Banshee and the Hunter more consistent, which could have been exciting. Oh, the Gutless Plunderer as well was an option. As far as I remember, we mostly died in the sky. Maybe I'm just misremembering because last game we died in the sky. But I don't remember this was going to be a super good blocker. So there's first strike and flying and stuff running around. All right. Yeah, not exactly the record I would have wanted out of this deck, but it did much better than it looked like it was going to do when we started 1 and 2 here. Still a great recovery, and I still think that this is a fantastic deck. Pretty happy with how the draft itself went, even if the games didn't quite get us to the full trophy run this time around. But that is going to end today's video. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons and YouTube members for their support, as well as you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it and are interested in watching some more, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to tell the YouTube algorithm to send you some more in your recommended feed. If you'd like to catch me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link in the description below. But other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.